Marcus Chen adjusted his environmental suit one last time before stepping off the transport shuttle. The artificial gravity of Nexus Station felt different under his boots, lighter than Earth's pull, but heavier than the moon colonies he'd grown up on. Around him, dozens of alien species moved through the massive docking bay with practiced efficiency. The Galactic Trade Consortium had finally opened its doors to humanity after 3 years of negotiations. Marcus was part of the first human diplomatic mission to establish formal trade relations. His role as a xenobiologist was simple enough: observe, learn, and report back on alien customs and social structures. What he hadn't expected was the reaction his mere presence would cause. The moment he removed his helmet and breathed the station's recycled air, something changed. A Zephyrian merchant who had been haggling loudly with a Corvan trader suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Her large, compound eyes fixed on Marcus from across the bay. Her 4 arms trembled slightly, and her normally blue-tinted skin shifted to a pale green. Marcus pretended not to notice and followed his escort, Commander Sarah Walsh, toward the diplomatic quarters. But he could feel eyes on him. Not just curious glances, but something more intense. More primal. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered as they walked through a corridor lined with shops and food vendors. "Half the aliens we passed just stopped what they were doing." Marcus nodded. He'd noticed too. A group of Felian traders had actually stepped back when he passed, their cat-like ears flattening against their skulls. One of them had made a sound that his translator couldn't interpret, something between a purr and a whimper. Their quarters were in the diplomatic sector, a neutral zone where different species could interact safely. The rooms were designed to accommodate various atmospheric requirements, but the human section felt sterile compared to the vibrant alien districts they'd passed through. Dr. Chen, their consortium liaison, a tall bird-like Etherian named Kextar, addressed him with what seemed like forced calm. "Perhaps it would be wise for you to remain in the human quarters for the first few days. Allow the station residents to adjust to your presence." "Adjust to what, exactly?" Marcus asked. "I'm here to study and learn. I can't do that locked away." Kextar's feathers ruffled slightly. "Your species is new to the consortium. Many of our citizens have never encountered a human before. There may be unexpected reactions." Sarah crossed her arms. "What kind of reactions? Are we talking about fear, aggression?" "Not aggression," Kextar said quickly. "Something else entirely. We've received reports from other stations where humans have visited. There seems to be a phenomenon." Before Marcus could ask what kind of phenomenon, an alarm chimed softly. Kextar's feathers fluffed up even more. "Excuse me, I must attend to station business. Please, remain here for now." After Kextar left, Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. "This is ridiculous," Marcus said. "I didn't come halfway across the galaxy to hide in a room." "Maybe we should listen to him," Sarah suggested. "If there's some kind of cultural issue we don't understand." But Marcus was already heading for the door. He'd spent years studying xenobiology through databases and video feeds. This was his chance to observe alien behavior firsthand, and he wasn't going to waste it. The commercial district of Nexus Station was a maze of shops, restaurants, and entertainment venues. Each species seemed to have carved out its own section, with architecture and lighting suited to their needs. Marcus wandered through it all, trying to blend in despite being the only human in sight. He found himself in what appeared to be a food court. The smells were overwhelming and completely alien. Some were pleasant, others made his stomach turn. He approached a vendor selling what looked like crystallized fruit, run by a species he didn't recognize. They were humanoid, but covered in fine silver fur, with large black eyes and delicate features. The moment the vendor noticed him approaching, she froze. Her nostrils flared, and she took a sharp breath. Her entire body began to tremble, and she gripped the counter so hard her knuckles went white beneath her fur. "Are you all right?" Marcus asked, concerned. The vendor's response was barely a whisper. "That Aroma? You're human, aren't you?" Marcus blinked in surprise. His translator had worked perfectly, but there was something in her tone he couldn't quite place. "Yes, I'm Dr. Marcus Chen. I'm here with the diplomatic mission." The vendor's trembling intensified. Her large eyes never left his face, and her breathing became rapid and shallow. I've read about your kind, but experiencing it firsthand." She trailed off, seeming unable to finish her thought. "Experiencing what?" Marcus asked. "I don't understand." Before she could answer, other vendors began to notice the commotion. A Corvin trader from the next stall over caught Marcus's scent and immediately backed away, his rocky exterior actually changing color. A group of Felians who had been browsing nearby suddenly became very still, their tails twitching nervously. The silver-furred vendor leaned closer to Marcus, despite her obvious distress. "Your species, the pheromones you produce, they're unlike anything in the known galaxy." "Pheromones?" Marcus was genuinely confused. Humans did produce pheromones, but they were subtle and primarily affected other humans. "The chemicals your body releases," she explained, her voice still shaky. "They don't just carry information about your species. They carry something else, something that affects the deep brain structures of almost every known sapient species." Marcus looked around and realized that a small crowd had gathered. Not close enough to be threatening, but close enough to watch. Some looked afraid, others seemed curious, but all of them appeared to be struggling with some kind of internal conflict. A Zephyrian security officer approached, her forearms held in a non-threatening position but ready to act if needed. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to return to the diplomatic sector." "But I haven't done anything wrong," Marcus protested. "No, you haven't," the officer agreed. "But your presence is disruptive. Please come with me." As Marcus was escorted back through the station, he couldn't help but notice how every alien he passed reacted to him. Some backed away, others seemed drawn closer despite themselves. A few actually left their shops or stalls and followed at a distance, as if they couldn't help themselves. Back in the diplomatic quarters, Commander Walsh was waiting with Kextar and another alien Marcus didn't recognize. This one was small and green, with multiple eyes arranged around his head. "Dr. Chen," Kextar began, "this is Dr. Vothak, our chief xenobiologist. He specializes in interspecies chemical communication." Dr. Vothak studied Marcus with several of his eyes while keeping others focused on various instruments. "Fascinating," he murmured. "The readings are even stronger than the report suggested." "What readings?" Marcus demanded. "Will someone please explain what's going on?" Dr. Vothak set down his instruments. "Dr. Chen, your species produces a complex array of chemical compounds that, when combined, create a phenomenon we've never encountered before. These compounds affect the limbic systems of most known sapient species in ways that are unprecedented." "Meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning," Dr. Vothak continued, "that exposure to human pheromones triggers responses that bypass conscious thought and go directly to the most primitive parts of our brains: fear responses, attraction responses, territorial responses, nurturing responses, all at once." Marcus sat down heavily. "So I'm like a walking chemical weapon." "More like a walking contradiction," Dr. Vothak explained. "Your pheromones simultaneously trigger opposing responses. The result is profound confusion at a neurological level. Most species find themselves drawn to humans while simultaneously being terrified of them." Commander Walsh leaned forward. "Is this dangerous? Are we putting the station at risk?" "Not dangerous in the traditional sense," Kextar assured her. "But disruptive, yes. We've had reports of productivity drops, social conflicts, and even some emotional breakdowns on stations where humans have visited for extended periods. There's more, Dr. Vothak added. The effects seem to be cumulative and possibly permanent. Aliens who spend time around humans report lasting changes in their behavior and thinking patterns. Marcus thought about the vendor's reaction, the way she'd trembled and seemed unable to control her responses. What kind of changes? Increased curiosity, reduced fear of the unknown, greater willingness to take risks. Dr. Vothak listed, but also increased anxiety, difficulty sleeping, and in some cases, obsessive thoughts about humans. That doesn't sound entirely bad, Sarah observed. Perhaps not, Kextar agreed. But it is concerning from a cultural preservation standpoint. Many species have very strict social structures and behavioral norms. Exposure to humans seems to loosen these constraints. Marcus stood up and began pacing. So what are you saying? That humanity can't join the consortium because we're too disruptive? Not necessarily, Dr. Vothak said. But we need to understand these effects better before full integration can proceed. Some species are more affected than others. The Etherian Council, for instance, seems largely immune due to their different brain chemistry. But species like the Felians, Corvins, and especially the Lyrians. He trailed off. What about the Lyrians? Marcus asked. Dr. Vothak exchanged a glance with Kextar. The Lyrians are perhaps the most affected. Their species has a heightened sensitivity to chemical communication. Exposure to human pheromones can cause what can only be described as a form of chemical intoxication. The vendor I met, Marcus realized. She was a Lyrian, wasn't she? Most likely, Dr. Vothak confirmed, and she probably spent the rest of her shift unable to focus on anything but your encounter. Marcus felt a wave of guilt. He hadn't meant to cause anyone distress. Is there anything I can do? Some way to minimize the effect? Environmental suits help, Kextar suggested. The filtration systems block most pheromone transmission. But that defeats the purpose of cultural exchange, Marcus pointed out. How can I learn about other species if I'm sealed away in a suit? Dr. Vothak considered this. There might be another way. The effects seem to be dose-dependent. Brief, controlled exposures might be manageable, and some species are developing tolerance with repeated exposure. Tolerance? The Zephyrian security chief, for instance, has been on duty during every human visit to this station. Her initial reactions were severe, but she's learned to function despite the chemical influence. Marcus thought about this. What if we tried a gradual approach? Controlled meetings with volunteers who understand what they're getting into? Kextar's feathers rustled nervously. That could be problematic. We've had several requests from station residents asking to meet humans. Far more than we expected. That's not necessarily a bad thing, Sarah said. It is when those requests are coming from species who are normally extremely xenophobic, Dr. Vothak replied. We've had Corvin isolationists asking for meetings, Felian traditionalists who normally won't interact with any other species, even some Etherian researchers who are supposed to be above such influences. Marcus realized the full scope of what was happening. We're not just disrupting social norms, we're actually changing the way different species think about each other. Exactly, Dr. Vothak confirmed. Your presence doesn't just affect how aliens react to humans. It affects how they react to everything. Some species are becoming more open, more willing to interact with groups they've avoided for centuries. But that could be positive, Marcus argued. The consortium exists to promote cooperation between species. If human presence encourages that, or it could destabilize carefully maintained balance, Kextar countered. Some species avoid each other for very good reasons. Ancient conflicts, incompatible biologies, resource competition. If those barriers break down too quickly... The conversation was interrupted by a chime from the door. Kextar activated the security screen, then stepped back in surprise. On the other side of the door was the Lyrian vendor from the food court, along with two other aliens Marcus didn't recognize. "They're asking to speak with Dr. Chen," Kextar said, his voice uncertain. Marcus looked at the screen. The Lyrian vendor was still trembling slightly, but her expression was determined rather than fearful. The other two aliens, a Felian and what looked like a young Zephyrian, seemed nervous, but equally determined. "Should I talk to them?" Marcus asked. Dr. Vothek checked his instruments. "Brief exposure should be safe enough, but I'd recommend keeping this short." Marcus nodded. "Let them in." The three aliens entered cautiously. The Lyrian vendor kept her distance but met Marcus's eyes directly. "Dr. Chen, my name is Lyra Shin. I needed to speak with you about what happened earlier." "I'm sorry if I caused you distress," Marcus began, but she held up a delicate hand. "You misunderstand," she said. "You didn't cause distress. You caused clarity." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Clarity?" "For the first time in my life." "I wasn't afraid," she explained. "My species, we're cautious by nature. We avoid risks, stick to familiar patterns, rarely venture beyond our comfort zones. But when I caught your scent, when I saw you—" She paused, searching for words. "When you saw me, I realized how small my world had become," she finished. "I've been running that food stand for 20 years, selling the same crystallized fruits to the same customers every day. I never questioned it, never thought about doing anything different. But your presence made me see possibilities I'd never considered." The young Zephyrian stepped forward. "I'm Zet Kali. I'm a student at the station's research academy. I've been studying human broadcasts for months, trying to understand your species before this diplomatic mission arrived. But theory is nothing compared to actually being near you." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "Your people? You're impossible," Zet Kali said, and despite the translation, Marcus could hear admiration in his voice. "According to every model we have, humans shouldn't exist. Your planet is barely habitable by consortium standards. Your technology is primitive. You have no natural weapons, no armor, limited sensory capabilities. You should have died out long before achieving spaceflight." "But we didn't," Marcus said simply. "No, you didn't. And being near you, I can finally understand why." Zet Kali's forearms gestured excitedly. "It's not just intelligence or determination. It's something deeper, something that affects everyone around you." The third alien, a Felian with the typical cat-like features of his species, spoke up. "I'm Veltar. I represent a group of interested parties who have been monitoring human activities since your first contact with the consortium." "What kind of interested parties?" Commander Walsh asked, her hand moving instinctively toward her sidearm. "Peace," Veltar said quickly. "We're researchers, philosophers, social theorists. We've been studying the reports from stations that have hosted human visitors, and we believe we understand what's happening." Dr. Vothak leaned forward. "And what is your conclusion?" "Humans aren't just another species," Veltar explained. "They're what our ancient texts call a catalyst species, a form of life that doesn't just adapt to its environment, but fundamentally changes everything around it." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Changes it how?" "Look at your own history," Veltar continued. "Wherever humans go, they don't just survive. They transform entire ecosystems. You've turned deserts into gardens, tamed wild animals, even changed the composition of your planet's atmosphere. But it's not just physical environments you change. You change ideas," Lyra Shin added. "Perspectives, ways of thinking that have remained unchanged for millennia." Zet Kali nodded enthusiastically. "The chemical compounds you produce, they're not just pheromones, they're more like a key that unlocks dormant potential in other species' minds." Dr. Vothak was taking notes frantically. This is fascinating but highly speculative. What evidence do you have? Historical precedent, Veltar replied. This has happened before, though not in recorded galactic history. Our oldest archives speak of catalyst species that appeared periodically throughout the galaxy's development. They would emerge, interact with other forms of life, and then disappear, leaving behind species that were fundamentally changed. Disappear how? Marcus asked. That's unclear, Veltar admitted. Some texts suggest they transcended to higher forms of existence. Others imply they were destroyed by species that couldn't handle the changes they brought about. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Finally, Commander Walsh spoke up. So what you're saying is that humanity might be an evolutionary catalyst that could either elevate other species or cause the collapse of galactic civilization? That's one interpretation, Veltar agreed reluctantly. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. No pressure or anything. There's something else, Lyrashin said quietly. The effects aren't random, the changes humans cause in other species. They seem to be beneficial. The courage, the curiosity, the willingness to question established norms. These are positive traits. Positive for whom? Kextar asked. Change isn't always welcome or wise. But stagnation is death, Zetkali countered. Most of our member species have remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years. Cultural evolution has almost stopped for many of us. Perhaps that's why catalyst species exist, to prevent stagnation from becoming extinction. Dr. Vothak looked up from his notes. This is all very interesting, but we need empirical data. Dr. Chen, would you be willing to participate in some controlled experiments? What kind of experiments? Exposure studies with volunteers from different species. We need to understand the exact mechanisms at work and determine if the effects can be controlled or directed. Marcus looked at his 3 alien visitors, all of whom were watching him with expressions he was beginning to recognize. Hope mixed with fear, curiosity battling with caution. What do you think? He asked them. I think, Lyrashin said slowly, that for the first time since I was very young, I'm not afraid of the future. Zetkali nodded. And I think my research has suddenly become much more important than I ever imagined. Veltar's tail flicked thoughtfully. I think we're standing at the beginning of a new age, whether we're ready for it or not. Marcus looked around the room at the assembled aliens and his fellow human. Then I guess we'd better figure out what kind of age it's going to be. 3 weeks into the experiments, Marcus had learned more about alien biology than he'd ever imagined possible. The controlled exposure studies had yielded fascinating results, but they'd also raised even more questions about humanity's role in the galaxy. The research facility that Dr. Vothak had set up was state-of-the-art, with chambers designed to monitor every possible biological response while allowing safe interaction between Marcus and volunteer subjects from various species. What they'd discovered had shocked even the most experienced xenobiologists on Nexus Station. Marcus sat in the observation room, watching through reinforced transparent aluminum as a group of Corvin traders worked together on a complex puzzle. Under normal circumstances, Corvins were solitary creatures who rarely cooperated even within their own species. Their rock-like physiology and mineral-based biology made them naturally territorial and suspicious of others. But after just 10 minutes of exposure to Marcus's presence, the 3 Corvins had begun sharing information and coordinating their efforts. Their usual gruff communication had become more nuanced, and they were actually helping each other rather than competing. The changes in neural activity are remarkable, Dr. Vothak noted, studying the readouts from sensors monitoring the Corvins. Regions of their brains that are normally dormant are showing significant activity. Lyrashin, who had become an unofficial research assistant, despite having no formal training, pointed to another set of readings. And look at their stress hormones. They should be through the roof with 3 Corvins in close proximity, but they're actually lower than baseline. Marcus shook his head in amazement. How is this possible? What are my pheromones actually doing to their brain chemistry? That's what we're trying to understand, Dr. Vothak replied. But we're dealing with mechanisms that operate at a level we've never encountered before. Your chemical signature seems to activate neural pathways that most species haven't used in millennia. Commander Walsh, who had been observing the experiments with growing concern, spoke up. The question isn't how it's possible. The question is whether it's ethical. We're fundamentally altering the brain chemistry of sentient beings without fully understanding the consequences. But the changes appear to be positive, Zetkali argued from his position at another monitoring station. Increased cooperation, reduced fear responses, enhanced problem-solving abilities, these are improvements. According to human standards, Walsh countered, but these aren't humans. We have no right to decide what constitutes an improvement for other species. Marcus understood her concern, but he'd been talking with the test subjects after each session, and their responses had been overwhelmingly positive. The Corvins, for instance, had described their experience as awakening and had requested additional exposure sessions. Dr. Chen, a new voice called from the entrance to the observation room. Marcus turned to see a figure he didn't recognize, tall and ethereal with skin that seemed to shift between colors. I am Astra Moth of the Lumerian Collective. We need to speak. The Lumerians were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, ancient beyond measure and rarely involved in consortium politics. For one of them to visit Nexus Station was unprecedented. Dr. Vothak immediately stood and bowed formally. Honored Astra Moth, we are grateful for your presence. How may we assist you? Astra Moth's shifting gaze fixed on Marcus. It is not assistance we require, but understanding. The ripples of change you have caused are being felt across the galaxy, Dr. Chen. The collective has been monitoring the effects of human presence since your first contact, and we have concerns. What kind of concerns? Marcus asked. Though he had a feeling he didn't want to know the answer. Your species' influence extends far beyond simple pheromone interactions, Astra Moth explained. The beings you affect carry those changes with them when they return to their home worlds. We have detected alterations in behavior patterns across 17 different star systems. Commander Walsh paled. Are you saying that the people who've been exposed to humans are spreading these effects to others? In a manner of speaking, yes. The neurological changes appear to be transmissible through social interaction. Aliens who spend time around those who have been exposed to humans begin to exhibit similar behavioral modifications. Marcus felt a wave of panic. Are we talking about some kind of disease? A plague that changes how people think? Not a disease, Astromoth said carefully. More like an awakening. But awakenings can be dangerous when they occur too quickly or without proper preparation. Lyra Shin stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. Honored Astromoth, I have been working closely with Dr. Chen for weeks. The changes I've experienced, they've made my life better, richer. I'm not the same person I was before I met him, and I wouldn't go back if I could. And that is precisely the problem, Astromoth replied. Change, even positive change, can destabilize civilizations. Many species have built their entire societies around specific behavioral patterns and limitations. If those patterns shift too rapidly, you get social collapse. Dr. Vothak finished grimly. We've already seen early signs, Astromoth continued. Corvin isolationist colonies are beginning to form cooperative settlements. Felian traditionalists are questioning centuries-old customs. Even some Etherian research councils are abandoning their clinical detachment in favor of more emotionally driven investigations. Zetkali's four arms gestured excitedly. But those sound like positive developments, increased cooperation, willingness to question established practices, more passionate pursuit of knowledge. Perhaps, Astromoth acknowledged. But change without wisdom can be destructive. The Lumerian collective has witnessed the rise and fall of many galactic civilizations. We have seen what happens when species evolve too quickly for their own good. Marcus stared out at the Corvins, who were still working together in ways that should have been impossible for their species. So what are you suggesting? That we lock ourselves away? That humanity never interacts with other species? That is one option, Astromoth said, but perhaps not the wisest one. What do you mean? Astromoth's color shifted to a deep blue, which Marcus had learned usually indicated deep thought. The Lumerian archives contain references to previous catalyst species. They faced similar dilemmas. Some chose isolation, others chose unrestricted interaction. Neither approach ended well. What happened to them? The isolationists eventually stagnated and died out, their potential never realized. The interactionists caused such rapid change that galactic civilization collapsed into chaos, and they were ultimately destroyed by the very species they had tried to help. The observation room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Finally, Commander Walsh spoke. So you're saying there's no good option. Either we abandon our place in galactic civilization, or we risk destroying it. I'm saying, Astromoth corrected, that there must be a third path. The Lumerian collective believes that humanity represents the greatest opportunity for galactic evolution in millions of years. But opportunity without wisdom leads to catastrophe. Marcus turned away from the observation window. What would you suggest? Controlled evolution, gradual change guided by wisdom and experience. The Lumerians are willing to share our knowledge of previous catalyst species and help develop protocols for safe interaction. Safe for whom? Marcus asked. For the other species or for humanity? For everyone, Astromoth replied. Dr. Chen, your species possesses a remarkable gift. But gifts can become curses if they're not used wisely. The collective proposes a partnership. We will help you understand and control your influence, and in return, you will help us guide the galaxy toward a new stage of evolution. Dr. Vothak looked up from his instruments. What would such a partnership entail? Careful study, gradual exposure, training for both humans and affected species, the establishment of protocols and safeguards. Astromoth's color shifted to a warm gold. Most importantly, the development of wisdom to match the power you possess. Lyra Shin spoke up hesitantly. Honored Astromoth, speaking as someone who has been affected by Dr. Chen's presence, I believe the benefits outweigh the risks. The fear, the stagnation, the isolation that my species has lived with for generations. These things were already killing us slowly. At least this change offers hope. Hope can be dangerous when it moves too quickly, Astromoth replied. But despair is always fatal. The collective does not seek to prevent change, only to ensure it happens in a way that species can survive and benefit from. Zet Kali had been unusually quiet during this exchange, but now he spoke up. There's something else we need to consider. Dr. Chen isn't the only human. There are billions more on Earth and the colonies. If these effects are inherent to the human species, Marcus felt another wave of responsibility crash over him. You're right. I'm just one person. If every human has this kind of influence, which is why we must act quickly, Astromoth said. The consortium has already received requests from dozens of member species for formal contact with humanity. Some are motivated by curiosity, others by the reports of positive changes. A few are driven by fear and want to understand the threat you might represent. Commander Walsh straightened. Threat? Are we talking about potential military action against Earth? Not yet, Astromoth assured her. But fear is a powerful motivator. If species believe that human contact will fundamentally alter their civilizations against their will, they may take preventive measures. Marcus thought about his home. about the billions of humans who had no idea they might be seen as a galactic threat. How much time do we have? Not long. The Consortium Council is meeting next week to discuss humanity's application for membership. The decisions made there will determine whether your species becomes part of galactic civilization or remains isolated. Dr. Vothak was already making calculations. If we could demonstrate controlled interaction protocols, show that the effects can be managed and beneficial, that's what I'm hoping for, Astromoth agreed. But we'll need more than hope. We'll need concrete proof that humans and other species can interact safely. Marcus looked around the room at his colleagues and friends. Lyra Shin had become more confident and curious since their first meeting. Zetkali had grown from an eager student into a thoughtful researcher. Even Dr. Vothak seemed more open to new ideas and possibilities. But were these changes worth the risk to galactic civilization? "What do you need from me?" Marcus asked finally. "More test subjects, but with proper preparation this time," Astromoth replied. "Volunteers who understand what they're signing up for and who are trained to handle the psychological effects. We need to develop a curriculum for both humans and other species." "I can arrange that," Dr. Vothak offered. "We've had more volunteers than we can handle, and I think I can design better monitoring systems to track the long-term effects." "What about the transmissible nature of the changes?" Commander Walsh asked. "If people who've been exposed to humans start affecting others—" "That's actually where the opportunity lies," Astromoth explained. "If we can train the initial subjects to guide and moderate the changes they pass on to others, we create a network of managed evolution rather than chaotic transformation." Lyra Shin stepped forward. "I volunteer to be part of that training program. I want to help others navigate the changes I've experienced." Zetkali nodded enthusiastically. "As do I. The research possibilities alone are staggering." Marcus felt a surge of emotion that he struggled to identify. These beings had been strangers just weeks ago, but now he felt a connection to them that went beyond professional collaboration. "Are you sure? You'd be taking on a huge responsibility." "We're already taking it on," Lyra Shin replied. "The changes have already begun. The question is whether we guide them or let them happen randomly." Astromoth's color shifted to a brilliant white. "This is wisdom. The willingness to accept responsibility for change rather than simply hoping it will work out for the best." Over the following days, they developed a comprehensive plan. Human volunteers from the diplomatic mission would work with carefully selected aliens to create the first interspecies integration protocols. The Lumerians would provide historical context and guidance based on their ancient archives. The consortium would monitor the results and hopefully approve expanded human participation in galactic civilization. But as Marcus prepared for the next phase of experiments, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. The changes he caused in other species were profound and seemingly permanent. But what was happening to him in return? He'd spent so much time focused on his effect on others that he'd barely noticed how constant exposure to alien thought patterns and chemical signatures was affecting his own mind. He was starting to think differently, see patterns and connections he'd never noticed before. His understanding of complex systems and relationships had expanded beyond anything he'd thought possible. Was he becoming something more than human? And if so, what did that mean for his species' future in the galaxy? The night before the first official interspecies integration session, Marcus stood in his quarters looking out at the vast tapestry of space beyond Nexus Station. Somewhere out there was Earth, home to billions of humans who would be affected by the decisions made in the coming days. He thought about Lyra Shin's transformation from a fearful vendor to a confident researcher, about Zetkali's evolution from an eager student to a thoughtful scientist, about the Corvins learning to cooperate for the first time in their species' history. Change was inevitable. The only question was whether it would be guided by wisdom or driven by fear? And somehow, the answer to that question rested partly on his shoulders. Marcus took a deep breath and made a decision. Tomorrow, he would find out whether humanity was ready to take its place among the stars, or whether the galaxy would decide that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to spread their influence any further. Either way, there was no going back. The catalyst had been released, and the galaxy would never be the same. The consortium council chambers were unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Representatives from over 200 species sat in a vast amphitheater that seemed to defy physics, with gravity fields oriented to accommodate different physiologies and atmospheric zones customized for various breathing requirements. The architecture itself seemed to shift and flow, adapting to the needs of its occupants. Marcus stood in the center of it all, feeling very small and very human. Beside him, Lyra Shin had transformed yet again. The nervous vendor he'd first met had become a poised advocate, speaking confidently about her experiences with human contact. Zetkali presented research data with the passion of someone who truly understood its implications. Dr. Vothak had compiled months of careful observations into comprehensive reports that painted a picture of controlled, beneficial change. But it was Astra Moth who commanded the most attention. When the ancient Lumarian spoke, the entire chamber fell silent. "Honored counselors," Astra Moth began, "we stand at a crossroads that will define the next epoch of galactic civilization. The question before us is not whether humanity should join the consortium, but whether we have the wisdom to guide the evolution they will inevitably trigger." A massive Titan representative, his rocky form towering even in the low-gravity section, rumbled his response. "The Lumarians speak of evolution, but we see only disruption. Our trade routes have been affected by behavioral changes in our partners. Our carefully balanced treaties are being questioned by species that have had contact with these humans." "And is that necessarily bad?" asked a delicate crystalline being, her voice like wind chimes. "The Nexari Accord has kept our two species from meaningful contact for 3 centuries, but after exposure to human influence, both our peoples are questioning whether that separation serves any purpose beyond tradition." "Tradition exists for a reason," the Titan replied. "Stability, predictability, the prevention of conflict." Marcus had been listening to similar debates for hours. The council was deeply divided between those who saw humanity as an opportunity and those who viewed them as a threat. But he was beginning to understand that the real issue wasn't about humans at all. "May I speak?" he asked, and the chamber gradually fell quiet. "Council members," Marcus began, "I've spent the last 2 months learning about your species, your cultures, your fears and hopes. And I've realized something important. The changes you're worried about aren't really about humanity." A murmur ran through the chamber. Marcus could see confusion and curiosity on dozens of different faces. "Every species represented here has incredible potential," he continued, "abilities and perspectives that could benefit everyone. But somewhere along the way, you've all learned to limit yourselves, to stay in your lanes, to avoid risks." "Caution is wisdom," declared a Malarian representative, his tentacles writhing nervously. "Our species has survived for millennia by avoiding unnecessary complications." "But at what cost?" Marcus asked. "Lyra Shin, tell them about your life before we met." Lyra Shin stood gracefully. "I spent 40 years doing the same job in the same place, never questioning whether there might be something more. My species taught me that curiosity was dangerous, that change led to suffering. I believed it because everyone around me believed it." "And now," prompted Marcus, "now I'm helping to design the first interspecies integration protocols in galactic history. I'm learning things I never imagined possible. I'm contributing to something meaningful instead of just existing." Her voice grew stronger. I'm alive in a way I never was before. Zetkali stepped forward. My people pride themselves on logic and rational thought, but we've become so focused on analysis that we've forgotten how to feel wonder. Dr. Chen's presence didn't give me new knowledge. It gave me back my sense of awe at the universe. Pretty words, the Titan representative said dismissively. But what about the practical consequences? Trade disruptions, social unrest, the breakdown of established order? Dr. Vothak activated a holographic display. Our data shows that while there has been initial disruption, the long-term effects are overwhelmingly positive. Productivity increases of 15 to 30% across affected populations, reduction in interspecies conflicts by 40%, innovation rates up by over 200%. And the cost of that change? Asked a council member Marcus didn't recognize, some sort of energy being that existed as a shifting field of light. Learning to think differently isn't a cost, Marcus replied. It's an investment. Yes, change is uncomfortable. Yes, it requires leaving behind familiar patterns. But the alternative is stagnation. Astra Moth's form brightened. Dr. Chen speaks truth. The Lumerian archives record the histories of 17 previous galactic civilizations. Those that embraced change and growth flourished for millions of years. Those that prioritize stability and tradition no longer exist. A new voice spoke from the highest tier of the amphitheater. Marcus looked up to see a being he hadn't noticed before, apparently composed entirely of crystallized light. I am the oracle of the eternal collective. Our species transcended physical form eons ago, and we have watched the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The entire chamber fell into complete silence. Even Astra Moth bowed respectfully. We have observed the human phenomenon across multiple probability streams, the oracle continued, its voice resonating directly in Marcus's mind. In 97% of potential futures, human integration leads to a new golden age of galactic civilization. In 2%, it leads to beneficial but limited change. In less than 1%, it results in collapse. And what determines which outcome occurs? Asked a council member. The wisdom and courage of this assembly, the oracle replied. Fear leads to restriction, which leads to stagnation and eventual collapse. Wisdom leads to guided integration, which leads to unprecedented growth and prosperity. Marcus felt the weight of billions of lives across thousands of worlds pressing down on him. What exactly are you asking of humanity? The oracle's attention focused on him with an intensity that made his head spin. Not just humanity, Dr. Chen. We ask all species represented here to take a leap of faith, to trust in the possibility of something greater than what you have now. Specifically? Commander Walsh asked from her position in the gallery. Astromoth stepped forward. A new kind of civilization. Not the careful balance of separate species we have now, but true integration. Shared knowledge, combined perspectives, unified goals. Mixed crews on starships, Lyra Shin added excitedly. Joint research projects. Cross-species communities. The end of isolation and the beginning of true cooperation, Zetkali concluded. The Titan representative's rocky form shifted uneasily. You're talking about the fundamental restructuring of galactic society. The risks are enormous. So are the rewards, Marcus replied. But more importantly, change is already happening. The question isn't whether to allow it, but whether to guide it. Dr. Vothak displayed new data. We've tracked the spread of human influence behavior across 37 star systems. The changes are accelerating and spreading even without direct human contact. Isolation is no longer an option. Then what do you propose? Asked the energy being that had spoken earlier. Marcus looked around the chamber at hundreds of different faces representing hundreds of different worlds. Partnership, real partnership, not just trade agreements and territorial treaties, but actual cooperation. Starting small, Astromoth added. Volunteer mixed crews on exploration vessels, joint research stations, cultural exchange programs with proper preparation and support. And if problems arise, the Titan asked. We solve them together, Lyrashin said simply. That's what partners do. The Oracle's light brightened. The Eternal Collective will support this proposal. We offer our knowledge and resources to help guide this transition. As do the Lumarians, Astromoth confirmed. One by one, representatives began to speak. The crystalline beings offered their advanced material science. The Zephyrians volunteered their exploration fleets. Even some of the more conservative species began to express cautious interest, but the vote, when it came, was closer than Marcus had hoped. The motion to approve controlled human integration passed by only a narrow margin, with several major species abstaining or voting against. As the session concluded and beings began to file out of the chamber, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had won, but barely, and the real work was just beginning. Dr. Chen, the Oracle approached him as the crowd dispersed. You understand that this is only the beginning? The path you have set us on will require generations to complete. I know, Marcus replied, but someone had to take the first step. Indeed, and you should know that your species will not be unchanged by this process. The influence flows both ways. Humanity will become something new as well. Marcus thought about the changes he'd already noticed in himself, the expanded awareness and understanding that came from constant exposure to alien perspectives. Is that good or bad? It simply is, the Oracle replied. Evolution is neither good nor bad. It simply represents potential realized. Over the following months, the first integrated crews were assembled. Marcus found himself aboard the exploration vessel Harmony, working alongside beings he'd only read about in xenobiology texts. The ship itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, with sections designed for different species but common areas where everyone could interact safely. Lyrashin had been assigned as the cultural integration specialist, helping crew members navigate the changes they experienced from prolonged contact with each other. Zetkali served as the mission scientist, studying the effects of deep space exploration on mixed crews. The mission itself was ambitious, a journey to the galactic rim to investigate ancient ruins that might hold clues about previous catalyst species. But Marcus suspected the real mission was to prove that different species could work together effectively. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Within weeks, the mixed crew was functioning as a unified team in ways that single-species crews never could. Human intuition combined with Zephyrian analytical skills. Corvin persistence merged with Felian creativity. Crystalline precision enhanced by Lumarian wisdom. They made discoveries that no single species could have achieved alone. Ancient technologies that responded to multi-species interaction. Patterns in the cosmic background radiation that only became visible when observed through multiple perceptual frameworks simultaneously. It's like we're becoming something new, Lyrashin observed one evening as she and Marcus watched the stars from the observation deck. Not just humans and aliens working together, but a new kind of consciousness entirely. Marcus nodded. He'd been feeling it too. The barriers between self and other were becoming blurred when he worked closely with his alien colleagues. Not in a way that threatened his identity, but in a way that expanded it. The Oracle was right, he said. We're all changing, becoming something more than what we were. And you're okay with that? Marcus thought about the fearful vendor he'd first met, the nervous student Zetkali had been. The isolated existence so many species had accepted as normal. Then he looked at what they'd all become. More than okay, he replied. I think it's exactly what the galaxy needed. As the Harmony continued its journey toward the galactic rim, carrying its crew of transformed beings toward discoveries none of them could have imagined alone, Marcus reflected on how far they'd all come from that first moment when Lyra Shin had caught his scent and started trembling. The fear was gone now, replaced by excitement about the future they were building together. A future where the boundaries between species became bridges instead of walls, where diversity was strength rather than a source of conflict. The galaxy was changing, one interaction at a time, and for the first time in his life, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Behind them, reports from integrated stations and mixed crews continued to pour in. Success stories of cooperation that had seemed impossible just months before. Species that had been enemies for centuries learning to work together. Technologies emerging from combined knowledge that surpassed anything any single civilization had achieved. The catalyst had done its work. The galaxy would never be the same, and that, Marcus realized, was exactly the point. Change wasn't something to be feared or controlled. It was something to be embraced and guided with wisdom. The age of isolation was ending. The age of integration had begun. And somewhere in the vast tapestry of stars ahead, new possibilities were waiting to be discovered by beings who had learned that they were stronger together than they had ever been apart.